I'm Edna Everage, housewife superstar, talking to all my darling little friends on the BBC. Don't touch your face.
Wow.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that, should I? But, you know, since you got rid of your clipboard, you've been fiddling with yourself again.
You take your hand off my knee, Waggy, will you? Because in my case, you could have your hand on something else and not know it. I can do that. No, please, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm sure a little bit of a homely person yourself, darling. From Putney and shopping in S&M. Is that where you go? No, sorry. M&S.
I knew it would be like this.
Hello, Christine. How lovely. Wasn't she marvellous? On daybreak this morning, she was...
What you've just witnessed is a selection of TV faces from over the years, all getting a verbal mauling from one of the sharpest, funniest, and now sadly most missed forces of nature to ever grace our TV screens, the wonderful Barry Humphries. There were so many times that he made us laugh. And as someone who more than once experienced a full-on Dame Edna-ing, I am representing all the long-suffering presenters, chat show hosts and interviewers who came into contact with her and Les Patterson and even Barry himself over the years and just about survived the experience.
What's your average audience? How many people?
About 5 million?
Yeah. 7 million are watching this show since I stepped off the step.
Wow. Hello to the extra 2 million. It's lovely to have you with us.
Thank you, my loyal public. These are people who normally wouldn't bother to watch your show.
That's right.
Facing any one of them in front of the cameras was half thrilling, half terrifying. My experience was, well, all plans went out the window and you just had to cling on for the ride. If you could keep the show vaguely on track and on time, then you'd better count that as a victory because it was the only one you'd get. What am I talking about? Well, moments like this.
People say that you and Barry are actually the same person.
What kind of people would say that?
Well, Matt told me earlier.
I didn't know, wouldn't say
My
it.
gynecologist wouldn't say it. Oh, no. I've never been... How can I put it live before you? This is going straight out, isn't it?
Absolutely.
If any
Straight
little
out, yes.
tasteless thing was said, they couldn't do anything about it, could they?
And you know, you've
broken out in the speeds of perspiration. When he had his clipboard, at least I think a man like you needs a clipboard on your lap because you can rearrange yourself behind it. You can. I like always to have an exploratory before I go on television. Just a check-up. And he gave me the thumbs up. He did.
Looking back at those encounters underlines how Barry inhabited the characters of Edna and Les Patterson completely, especially Edna, and somehow nobody questioned it. Not the audiences and not even the stars being laughed at in ways they possibly hadn't experienced for years.
I'm so excited to meet you.
Are you? I wish I could say the same. Please, no, I didn't mean that to sound horrible, but I've never heard of you. No, hello, Cliff, how lovely.
Beautiful.
I can see up close. I know who you are.
Well, thank you.
Hello, Michael.
Hello, Dame Edna. Very well, thank you. You're looking wonderful. You're ageless.
Well, I'm trying to be ageless. I've had a little work done, but
have you?
Not quite as much as some of us. No.
Don't let me even say that. Keep your eyes that way.
No, but the thing is, you are still recognisable. That's what I like. You know, some people, you know this as well as I do, they go in to see these cosmetic surgeons, and they forget, before the anaesthetic takes over, they forget to say, I want people to know who I am when I come out. You know, they go in like a Mercedes, and they come out like the backside of a Ford Mondeo. They do.
Now, I think Sir Tom Jones might have happily throttled anybody else who did that, and that's almost certainly the reaction Barry was after. But he was more than that. Edna was always chat show gold, partly thanks to Barry's incredible skills as a wordsmith. He was a wizard from Oz who could conjure up unforgettable images in just a few phrases.
To me, all the wives of the Presidents of the United States all look the same, haven't they? They've all had that tight, really over surgery look. You know, that look that my bridesmaid, Madge Alsop, has got. You know, she's had so many facelifts. You know, the small of her back is like a Brussels sprout. I mean, it's yucky. The skin, when she sees a little crow's foot, she gets a knitting needle and sticks it in and winches up her face. It is ghastly.
Edna was, without doubt, Barry's greatest triumph. He once called her indestructible. She was with him for over 6 decades. And when you look back at his life on television, most of it was spent as Edna. Even on a rare moment when Barry overshadowed Edna and to her annoyance was named the Variety Club Entertainer of the Year, it was she who did most of the talking.
It's difficult for me to pay tribute to someone for whom I have very, very little respect. Not that I don't mind giving him 15% of my income. I don't miss it, frankly. But I think it's spooky to make agents entertainers of the year. Quite frankly, I do. I'm sorry, but I do. Call me old-fashioned. However, I'd like to take this opportunity, and I want to go on record because I know there are little members of the media here, and I want to scotch something once and for all. A yucky old rumour that Barry Humphries and I are the same person. What a sick person would have thought up a story like that. Just because we have very rarely been photographed together doesn't mean a thing. And anyone who thinks that I am Barry Humphries, I will submit if there are doctors here. Are there any doctors here? There's one with his hand up, and not the first time today either, Doctor. But I know this is a thing people don't say at lunch, but I can get away with murder. I'm happy to submit to a smear. I am. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Some of the magic of television there, creating a little sense of confusion. From the very start, Barry loved to leave people feeling unsettled and unsure how to respond. And some of his early pranks have now gone down in comedy folklore.
I invented practical jokes, which weren't meant to be filmed or even talked about on programmes such as this. They were entirely for my own pleasure.
You've done some spectacular ones, haven't you?
Yes, the practical jokes are often rather dull when they're related. I warn you in advance. But what I liked to do, for example, was to have breakfast served to myself on the train into town. So that at the first station, for example, a grapefruit would be presented to me as I sat there reading the morning paper. At the next station, and at each station, incidentally, I had an accomplice waiting. The next station, cornflakes, toast, and by the time I got into town, a cup of coffee. And, of course, the other people in the compartment were totally mystified. This was many years, of course, before candid camera. So no one quite knew what was happening.
This was street theatre?
And it was kind of street theatre before street theatre had been invented.
There's also a famous story, which I will tell, but you can confirm or deny, that you were on one airline in Australia when you chundered, I think is the word, into a bag, and then proceeded to eat it. What people didn't know was, in fact, that you filled the bag full of potato salad beforehand.
Yes, it was actually...
It was, in fact, tinned sweet corn, I hasten to say. This was when, you know, I started... It is awful, isn't it? But, I mean, all I can say is it was funny at the time.
Not long after that, funny at the time became funny all the time, with the creation of You Know Who.
What a joy it is to have a little bit of a chinwag with you lovely English once again. If it wasn't for your polluted water and your foot and mouth, you'd be as good as Australia any day. And I mean that most sincerely.
What gave you the idea, Barry, though, of first of all, of creating this repertory of characters? I mean, where in fact, first of all, did you meet Dame Edna?
Well, I was in a production of Shakespeare because from university I drifted into amateur university theatre and then into professional theatre. That's to say, they paid £5 a week. And I toured in a production of Twelfth Night. On the bus trips between one town and another, every member of the cast had a party turn. Someone sang a song, someone recited a poem. I used to sit in the back seat of the bus and impersonate the Lady Mayoress of the next town, because everywhere we went, there was always a party after the show, and the Lady Mayoress would always stand up and say what a wonderful thing it was that these people were bringing Shakespeare to the Australian bush. And then she'd get the name of the play wrong. So I had this falsetto, and which I'd learnt from school plays and that kind of thing, and I would sit in the back seat and do this voice, which amused everyone greatly, so that at Christmas time, when we had to do the pantomime, our producer said to me, why didn't I do that character? And I said, well, I could do it in the wings. I could do the funny voice, and one of the actresses could impersonate this person, who we'd christened Edna, because it was probably the dullest name we could possibly think of. So I was Edna, and I wrote a sketch for Edna. And I once again borrowed some appropriate female attire. Well, I resembled a pantomime dame more than anything else. But the character was born. It seemed suddenly that I'd hit upon a vein of humour that no one had tried before, certainly not in Australia. So on and off in the years that followed, interrupting a pretty busy life as a professional actor, a character actor, I, from time to time, did the character of Edna. It always surprised me that the character became so popular. It had always just been a pastime of mine. You know, sometimes I think that I take the theatre itself a little too lightly. It gives me enormous pleasure to act on the stage. And to have discovered that I have the gift of making people laugh is a marvellous thing, for which I'm very grateful.
Whenever Edna was a guest on a programme, you never got Barry arriving and then disappearing into a dressing room. It was the great dame that we saw from the very start. She would always arrive perfectly made up, looking $1 million, Aussie dollars, naturally. The outfits would take on a life of their own. And one thing she always had was specs appeal.
These, look, you notice my glasses. Get a close-up of those. Look, see? Can you see? Look, they match my glasses, isn't it? Isn't it wonderful? There's a woman over there, her face is contorted with envy. It is, Tony.
But you just come back from Paris, so presumably you might have bought all these
Travel all the time.
accoutrements.
I don't know.
Okay.
I set the style. There was nothing Paris could teach me, Possum. There wasn't. The Australian fashions, look at these glasses of mine. These are all coming back into style now. These are glasses designed by my son, Kenny, a couturier, in the form of look, you see, it's the map of Australia. Incidentally, I am an Australian. And it's the map of Australia. And look, little Tasmania's down there. Isn't it lovely? Tasmania is a little... Oh, listen to, there's an echo in the studio. For those of you, who haven't got vision, there's another end to the studio and a darling little, the Cinderella of our audience, aren't they? But we'll be round.
Yes.
No, we'll be paying them some attention. But Tasmania's a thing that little dangles off the tip of Australia. And there are two of them there. And another, I'll show you something else, ladies. A little fashion note down here. Here's a pair my son has just designed. Aren't they gorgeous? Aren't they? Have you got a picture of that, boys? Now, what else have I got? You see, I understand the technology of television. And what else? Punk, my punk look. Oh, this is a bit scary. Look at these. I think... Oh. Look, I could play Betty Davis parts in these, couldn't I?
Is there a connection between these and sex appeal, Dame Edna?
No, look, sex appeal, I think the whole business of sex has been something that's been dwelt on too much by the media.
You're still there? You're in some...
I'm under here, but I think these tend to rob me a little bit of my femininity. What do I put on now? Oh, look at these. These are my son. Do you know what the pink triangle signifies, viewers? I'm sure I don't. But I believe it's something to do with gaiety, liberation. My son designed these. Look at that. I'm sure there's a minority of our viewers who know what these signify.
Edna's look had evolved over the years. In the earlier days, things were slightly less big budget. And here's a glimpse from when she was just Mrs. Everage. It's quite timely too, bearing in mind some recent events. Back on the 18th birthday of a certain Prince of Wales.
The Queen never stops, and I just hope she puts her feet up over the weekend, because she's got a very, very big day on Monday with Prince Charles having his birthday. She's probably got her hands full baking and rushing up and downstairs putting people's coats on the bed, so I only hope the little mite looks after herself. If you're looking in, you take a tip from me, dear. Get yourself a nice pair of flesh pink surgical stockings, I'm telling you. They're the only things that keep me going, I'm telling you. Anyway, we're all tickled to bits about Charles's birthday. Hail to thee, young princeling, the Commonwealth cries with joy. You're 18 years old on Monday. You're a man now, no longer a boy. We Aussies had a share educating your young heir to the throne which your mother now regales. So Australia thinks it's vital that you should change your title to the Prince of New South
Edna was embraced by audiences everywhere from the very start, despite the fact that she could, in truth, be an absolute monster. And the fact the British public adored her didn't mean that she ever felt the need to be nice back to them.
What's your name?
Pamela.
Hello, Pam.
Hello. I've long since admired how you juggle your personal life with your career. Has it really been to the detriment of your family life, though?
Yes, it has. I've always, in a sense, put my family second. I think that's where very often they deserve to be, darling. I think some of us really feel guilt that we leave our families behind when our careers take off. It's much better exercise for our families to try and catch up on us. And it's helped my family, who are, in many ways, dysfunctional.
Well, I can see why, because I actually don't agree with you. I'm a working mother, and I think it's absolutely outrageous that you could have put your family second. I mean, for a career that you really could have put on hold.
Beg your pardon, who are you? What you've forgotten is that you asked my opinion. I didn't ask yours. That's the only difference. I don't particularly care what arrangements you've made.
But that's never stopped me. Why should it stop
I'm
you?
telling you what works for me, Possum. Gorgeous little woman, too. Where are you from?
I'm from Ghana.
From Ghana?
Yeah.
I've never been there, and I don't think I'm ever going to go. What is your name?
Sharon.
Sharon?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, Sharon, of a word to describe what you're wearing. Affordable. That's it. Affordable.
Well, listen. Because you're like cruel as Dame Edna.
Yes, indeed. She behaves towards people in the audience in a manner which I would find impossible, nor would I wish to treat people in the audience the way Edna does. She, of course, insists it's her way of caring. It's a way of chastising a member of the audience in a maternal and fundamentally helpful way. I find that difficult to believe, frankly, if not downright implausible. But I think one does shelter a little behind a character. But at the same time, I'm now convinced that Edna has a life of her own. This could make me some odd sort of theatrical schizophrenic, but I don't think so.
Often people who have characters in tow find it very limiting. It's all right for 4 or 5 years, but then where do they go? So whither, Dame Edna, Sir Les Patterson and Barry Humphries? Where from here?
When I do my stage shows in Australia, there's about 5 other characters as well. It's just that as the show goes on tour, Edna gets more talkative, Les gets more talkative, and the other characters get shoved out. By the time I get to London, there's barely room for anyone but Edna. She isn't a megastar at all, but she thinks she is. She's a Melbourne housewife who's suddenly become, well, the queen, or even a goddess. And the joke is, of course, that we know different, and it's important that I should still remember her origins.
When it comes to origin stories, Barry's own reveals how his first visit to Britain very nearly ended in a genuine tragedy. The story really came to light when Barry joined his friend Rick Stein for a trip down memory lane, with trip being the operative word.
It's very odd for me, Rick, to come here after 58 years, because it's just here that I had really probably the most dramatic event in my entire life.
Fresh from his first break on the West End stage in the musical Oliver, Barry took a holiday in Cornwall to work on developing his most famous character, Dame Edna.
Edna was a fairly recent creation of mine. So I took a suitcase full of old Australian women's magazines with me to Cornwall.
And study up on
I thought
what?
I'd try and get myself into the mind of a Melbourne housewife.
Fabulous. So what happened then?
One morning, it was in February, there was snow lying around looked like laundry, lying in the fields. And we went for a walk, and I put on my Wellington boots, and we wandered through the fields, and we had to cross a very small stream, which was frozen. Gingerly, I put my heel, rubber heel, on a stone, which was icy, covered with ice, and I slipped, and I sat down in the stream, freezing water, and I laughed. Seemed so ridiculous. But I didn't laugh for long, because that icy chute took me on a ride, a roller coaster ride. It zigzagged twice, and then over the cliff. I found myself on a ledge, a rocky ledge. There was a sort of waterfall running over my knees, ice cold, and my bottom was slipping slightly on the rock. And I looked down, and I saw these jagged rocks and the sea coming in. And I must have been a bit stunned. I'd broken my arm. I'd dislocated my shoulder, so I couldn't move.
You must have thought it was all over for you.
I thought, this is the end. This is how it's to happen. And then I heard a sound, a threshing sound, a helicopter. I thought, the Thunderbirds are here.
Incredibly, there's news footage of the rescue.
God, look at it. Oh, look at me.
I know.
I didn't expect anyone would come. It was my first starring role. They didn't get a close-up, unfortunately. And you know, Rick, I am having a near-death experience here.
I know. I was a bit reluctant to ask you to do this because I thought it might be so traumatic.
It is traumatic, actually. I do feel very emotionally involved in it.
I love the helicopter, though. I mean,
Oh,
gosh,
it's wonderful. A dragonfly from Mars. I think they've renamed it Barry's Leap.
You heard a bit of the Thunderbirds theme there, and here's a fun fact. Barry actually was meant to be the voice of Lady Penelope's butler Parker in the series, but got his diary confused, missed the recording date, and lost the job before he'd even started. And now another vocal mix-up. As we know, once Barry put on Edna's wig and glasses, he never, ever slipped out of character, except we've discovered a very rare moment where, for once, he seems to drop his guard despite the presence of BBC cameras. Way back in 1972, Barry was dipping a toe into movie stardom. He'd written a film called The Adventures of Barry Mackenzie, based on a comic strip that he'd created for the magazine Private Eye. The hero's aunt was Edna, and digging through the archives, we found this rare on-camera example of Mrs. Everage sounding suspiciously like Mr. Humphries.
This occurs towards the end of the film of The Adventures of Barry Mackenzie, when Barry Mackenzie's aunt, played by me as Mrs. Everage in lovelier creations than this, goes to visit the daughter of Mrs. Everage's bridesmaid, Madge Allsop. The daughter's name is Gayleen, but since she's been living in London, which she seems to like for some extraordinary reason, she has embraced Sappho, best way I can put it. And Mrs. Everage is lured towards Lesbos simultaneously, and that's why I appear as this. Of course, and I will also carry a copy of a book called Sappho of Lesbos, which I'm seen frequently reading in the television set. Can I sit down?
And this is what she was meant to sound like.
I enjoy England. Of course, it takes a while to adjust yourself to the lower standard of living over here. For instance, I was going along in a taxi with my nephew, Barry Mackenzie, only the other day, and I saw a beefeater rummaging in a dustbin. Terrible sight.
Well, now I'm delighted to announce that I have in the studio with me Edna Everage herself. Mrs. Everage, or Edna, if I may call you Edna, it must have been a most enormous thrill for you to find yourself transformed from housewife to superstar, overnight, as it were.
Barry, may I call you that?
Please. Yes.
Barry, here am I in London, an ordinary Australian housewife, and I make no bones about that. I may be, to you viewers, I may be a superstar, but I assure you that only recently I was up to my wrists in my kitchen sink in Melbourne, and here am I whisked into stardom, sometimes as I wake up perhaps at an odd hour, and one does after a long flight, in my suite at the Royal Rillington Plaza Hotel in Ladbroke Grove, London, Telegrams Christie, London. I have to pinch myself, quite honestly I do. I still can't believe all this wonderful, wonderful thing has happened to me.
Because apart from Elizabeth Taylor, you are the only housewife superstar, I think.
It is quite true. In fact, I'm hoping I'll get a little telegram from Elizabeth Taylor on the opening night of The Adventures of Barry Mackenzie, my starring vehicle at the Columbia. But, of course, Elizabeth Taylor has paid the penalty, as we see from the sad news about her marriage. However, of course, I was married to my husband, Norm, for many, many years before stardom.
You don't think it will affect you don't think it will affect your marriage?
No, I don't think so. I'm only sorry my husband, Norm, can't be here in London. He did want to, but he has not been a well person at all.
I'm sad. What's the problem?
My husband has a double hernia, so he has his hands full at the moment.
Edna's husband, Norm, was one of those classic comic creations who we never saw, but who we heard a lot about. And his health had been so bad for so long that when he passed away in 1988, it didn't come as a huge surprise.
Now that Norm has unfortunately left this mortal coil.
I'm glad I can laugh at it now. My husband, it's not certain. I mean, my husband Norm has been clinically dead 5 times now, Terry. And it's difficult for me to know whether he's dead or alive, to tell you the truth. And let's be honest, ladies watching, how many women watching this program know for certain whether their husband is alive or dead? Not many of us.
I want to talk about widowhood, if I possibly could, and really how you were coping, Dame Edna. It must be very difficult.
I lost my husband Norm a couple of years ago, Whoopi, and I've not really thought of throwing myself at anyone else.
You haven't?
I haven't.
You see, we did think that perhaps Larry Hagman might be, you know...
There was a rumour,
yes.
And I hope I scotched that. My lawyers are working on that. Larry and I are very good friends. We've shared a jacuzzi, and that's about all. And
But have you
Robert
ever-
Wagner is in town, but
Yes,
don't
indeed.
make anything of that whatsoever, please.
Right,
Prince
okay.
Rainier, Klaus von Bülow. Ooh. They've all written to me.
But have you ever attempted to reach... We were talking earlier on about spiritualism, about, you know, people, when they die, not quite going away, you were saying, weren't you? Have you ever tried... Because I know you believe in psychic energy.
I am a bit psychic, and you know that. You can feel my little vibes. I am a bit psychic, but I haven't tried getting in touch with Norm. I think as far as the dead are concerned, no news is good news. That's how I feel about my husband. And I don't miss him. I hope that doesn't sound callous.
No.
I don't. I miss his hardware, though, I do. Because he was on... Please, for heaven's sake. Please don't read things into what I'm saying.
Appearances like that were where Dame Edna really flourished. Barry once said that he'd even considered putting her into retirement. But guest slots on programmes like Parkinson made him realise that this character he'd created could be TV gold. Which is perhaps why, wisely or recklessly, depending on your point of view, the BBC gave Barry his own show, based at its famous home of Television Centre.
Where are we? What is this? What, Paul? What's this supposed to be? This austere, horrible-looking thing. What is it? Interview set? It's clinical, isn't it? Don't you think, audience? Don't you think it's antiseptic? The last time I was in a place like this, I had to leave a specimen. I think... No, they're not things to laugh at. You just let those things pass. This is like David Frost's idea of something cosy. I don't like it, Paul. How much would it cost the British taxpayer to give the BBC some money to brighten this up a little bit, darling? What? Oh, that much? That many thousands? Oh, taxpayers, can we afford it? Yes! Oh, good heavens. Oh, well, certainly. Please, bring down that little screen, will you, darling? Put a few bits and pieces up. Thank you, darlings. I knew you'd say yes. But we can't go on with the show. I hope they've stopped the cameras at that bit, and we'll start them again when they've redecorated. That's beautiful. Oh, a typical view of Sydney Harbour with its opera house. Look at that little man poised on the top of his wave, waiting for it to make up its mind. And look, these boys, look, you know, by the way, I should tell you, viewers, some of you in England have still got the flying ducks going up the wall. In Australia, we've phased that out now. We've completely phased it out. It's now the flying boomerang. See them? Can the camera see that? Isn't that a gorgeous idea? The Glads have come in. It's more homely already, isn't it, taxpayers? Aren't you? Yes, it is. Aren't you glad you invested in this little nook of comfort and coziness?
And here's the sort of thing Edna got up to in a studio once she'd got it how she liked it.
I'm just a woman who loves other women. I'm funny that way. I just adore the caress of someone in a dress, a mini, a penny, or a negligee. The menfolk have their place. Without them, the human race would fizzle out and come to a sticky end. But when your world is in a muddle and you need someone to cuddle, a woman is a girl's best friend. Sleepless nights because your man demands his rights till you think you might be going round the bend. Don't resort to alcohol
there's something else on which you may depend. When your world is in a muddle and you crave a nice long cuddle, remember.
Did the fame and the power that came with television go to Edna's head? Yes, almost instantly. Barry deliberately made sure that Edna's ego went into overdrive. The more extreme she became, the more her popularity seemed to grow. So when she began comparing herself to royalty on a regular basis, it really surprised no one.
Not many people know how lonely it is, how isolated it is inside when you're a superstar like me. I don't think really that there's anyone else in the whole world who knows how I feel, except perhaps one little lass. I wonder, can you guess? There's a woman who lives in a period home, a stone's throw from Big Ben. I wish I could give you a clue who I mean. You'd be wrong if you said number 10. Respect for our friendship forbids me to name her. I'll just say she sits on a throne. And if she ever gets fed up, I really don't blame her. For just like me, in almost every feature, I agree with this wonderful little creature. We can't call our lives our own, for it's life in a goldfish bowl. For people like me and the Queen, we can't go anywhere, even for a stroll, without having to wave and to smile and be seen. I adore superstardom, a tete-a-tete with Roger Vardam, a rendezvous with Margaret Trudeau. And if I slip into something showy, for a little lunch with David Bowie, there are Nikons wherever I go. But I'd not change my lot with a soul. I'm a bird in a goldfish bowl.
Let's keep things musical now and show how, despite her grand ways, Edna would very occasionally deign to share the spotlight with a few carefully selected fellow superstars.
She wouldn't have to change my nappies. I'd be happy just sitting on her knee. I'd eat my porridge by the playful and grow up big and strong and great. That a great big dame like Edna fancies me.
Unfortunately for Edna, it wasn't only clean-living, upstanding characters like Elton John in her life. At this point, the British public got their first real taste, a sort of old Stilton flavour of Barry Humphries' other great comic creation.
My name is Les Patterson, Patterson, and it's my job spearheading Australia's cultural penetration of the European cultural environment, not to put too fine a point on it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I've got a confession to make to you good people out there tonight. I've had a drink. I have partaken of liquid refreshment. As a matter of fact, I'm a little bit full. I'm as full as a Catholic school, as a matter of fact. I'd be a mug if I didn't admit that fact to you good people out there tonight. But I must say this, that the show I'm viewing tonight I find very, very acceptable indeed. Very, very acceptable. For those of you who might have been watching it since we kicked off tonight, ladies and gentlemen, you'll be saying to yourself, hello, old Les Patterson hasn't just hopped into the grog. He's hopped into a new outfit, and you wouldn't be wrong there, ladies and gentlemen. You wouldn't be wrong. You'd be spot on, because I have. Of course, I'm a wine buff, basically, but I'll tend to drink whatever is at hand under pressure, and this bottle of Ned Kelly whiskey just so happened to be in my filing cabinet under A for Aboriginal Affairs. The fact of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, that under this facade of sophistication, I'm basically a very, very ordinary bloke, but as the custodian of Australia's cultural and heritage, I have to keep up appearances. Are you with me? And my other suit, the one you've seen before if you've been watching since the show kicked off. The other suit has some very, very nasty stains on it. Horrible stains. Stains not inconsistent with a man in a hurry losing his footing in the bog and measuring his length on the dunny floor. Tell you how it happened.
Stop this! Stop it! Oh, what a terrible... What an insult, really. He's betraying Australia's international image. What a common man.
Can you tell me, just refresh my memory, what are your qualifications for being a cultural attaché?
Well, you don't need many qualifications. Australia, you see, in Australia you don't need qualifications. That's the wonderful thing about it.
One of the beauties of the country, isn't it?
You see, there's too many people in Britain overqualified. You're all overqualified, you viewers included. You're sitting out there, you know, you're up to your asses in qualifications, but where does that get you? Hey?
The dole queue?
Get you the dole queue. Yeah. No worries. Well, I haven't got any qualifications, but I love art. I love painting and poems, opera, Joan Bloody Sutherland, Omnibus, Jonathan Miller, bloody Arts Council, the lot of them. I love you. I do. More of it, that's what I say.
So Les, listen, you're an extraordinarily busy man as a cultural attaché.
Listen, I'm as busy as a one-armed taxi driver with crabs. That's busy.
That is busy, yes, but how do you keep it up?
Well, I've got a nice little girl Friday. I've got a very good research assistant, and you blokes at the BBC know what I mean by research assistants. Little Esther Ranson started off as a research assistant, and look where it's got her. Good on you, Est. We got the same dentist. Les was created because we have in Australia, as you have here, clubs. And the clubs have a big audience, and the people who go to the clubs don't really always go to the theatre. And I was told, although for many years I'd played theatres, conventional theatres in Australia, a friend of mine said, you haven't really got to the real Australian audience, you haven't done the clubs. So I was persuaded to do one of the biggest in Sydney. And I had to invent someone to warm up the audience. I thought, I just can't go on there cold. So I invented Les Patterson. I made Les Patterson the entertainment's officer for the club. I made him very drunk, and he staggered on, and it hadn't occurred to me he exactly resembled the secretary of the club. I hadn't consciously based him on anyone, but apparently he was absolutely identical to the secretary. And everyone listened very sympathetically to his apology. He was actually apologising to the audience that they didn't have an overseas act, you know.
He was saying, well, sorry, Sammy Davis can't be here this year, because in fact they do pay these stars big money to go out.
How good they do.
You'd know, Michael.
Thank you.
So he just happened like that. And he again caught on. It was a surprise to me, just as the success of Edna, because people liked the reality of the character. They liked the fact that he, although it was a bit over the top, the person could exist, and basically the person was warm-hearted.
Warm-hearted, and after a few stiff drinks, Sir Les was often hot to trot too.
I might have been away for 6 months or more, but when I stick me key in her old front door, she's down there scrubbing the kitchen floor, 'cause she's my old lady.
Sir Les was clearly partial to more than a drop of the hard stuff, but that was a habit Barry himself had dropped years earlier, as he speaks about in his unusually revealing interview with Michael Parkinson.
And you yourself are a teetotaler, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I'm totally a teetotaler. I drink huge quantities of liquid, but it's non-alcoholic, and that's not always, hasn't always been the case.
No, but there's a reason why you are teetotal. Why is that?
Well, I discovered, fortunately for me, must be about 12 years ago now, that I was allergic to the chemical ethyl alcohol, which is the important ingredient in that wonderful invention, booze. And for very many years of the career which I've just been outlining sketchily, I used alcohol with great success. I was always very nervous, as I found a lot of people in my profession are. And I found grog was wonderful. It was a miraculous discovery for me. I found it later than most people I know who still drink. It wasn't until I was in my early 20s that I started drinking at parties. Everyone did. And it was only 15 years later or so that it caught up with me, and I found that I drank differently to other people. I suppose, best illustrate it by saying, normal people go to parties and get drunk. I used to get drunk and go to parties. And I was the last person in the world who thought I had a problem. I found out later when I stopped drinking that there were a lot of people who were quite worried about the amount that I drank or what happened to me when I drank. I just felt I was more confident and more amusing. In fact, I myself was deeply unamused by my own behavior. I was a very despairing person.
Was there one moment when you knew you had to stop, when you took the conscious decision never to drink again?
Well, I got to the stage where I needed the morning drink. I found that I had to have a drink in the morning. I found myself at some of those pubs in Covent Garden that opened very early. You'd be surprised some of the people we know who were there. It's amazing how one feigns surprise, Oh, fancy seeing you here. Oh, yes, Just happened to be passing, old boy. And you have to wait till their back is turned to get the vodka up, because... and then you learn when you get to the stage of the scarf trick. I don't know if you know the scarf trick.
It's a scarf trick.
Well, you have a scarf on, and the barmaid puts the drink on the bar, and you wait for her to turn her back, and then you pick up the drink with the scarf, and you hold it firmly on the bar, and then you pull the scarf, and the drink comes smoothly up to the mouth. Well, you see, the terrible thing, the awful thing about alcoholism is that the last person really to know about it is the practicing alky. He thinks this is normal behavior. He doesn't realize he's insane. And a few people I know die with those views. Luckily, you know, I managed with quite a bit of help from a lot of other people and a very good doctor and an excellent hospital in my hometown of Melbourne. I managed to put the last drink down, and I haven't picked up a drink in 12 years. To me, it's one of the great things of life. It's out of the beverage class and in the poison class for me. But I was, in fact, such a boozer that I was offered a senior job at the BBC, and that shows you.
Not touching alcohol wasn't the only way Barry differed from Sir Les. Unlike the cultural attaché, Barry was cultured, an art lover, a rare book collector with a taste for opera and classical music. So how on earth was he also possibly the worst ever culprit when it came to smuggling innuendo into our living rooms? Brace yourself. Some of what follows may cause blushing.
Well, I don't mind what people do in their own homes, but lesbianism has always left a very nasty taste in my mouth. It has. Would you like a nice cuppa?
I would love some. Yeah.
You look like a girl who could do with something hot inside her. Thank you. This is an original by Mary Quant.
Really? It is. Who was a wonderful designer of the 60s. And, you know, I've had this since that far-off age, and I've never had any alterations on it. It's never been changed. My Quant is the same size as it was in the 60s. It is.
This is an Indigenous Australian savoury. Can you guess what it's called? Please, don't be unnecessary. Hillary Clinton was there last night, bless her, and she looked happy. She did. She said, oh, it's a relief, Edna, you know. It is a relief. She said, I never thought I'd say this to you. She said, but I never thought I'd say to another woman, you know, what a relief I found lipstick on his collar last night.
Oh, I love Les Patterson.
Well, he's just written a song, Matt, which he hopes will be very successful.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I can't wait to hear that one.
It's called How Can I Tell You I Love You When I Can Hardly Breathe Down Here? And it promises to be quite popular, I think.
My husband and I are trying to conceive, and we just wondered if you had any tips.
Be careful.
I would recommend sexual intercourse.
Those sorts of moments were what made Barry's live shows sell out all over the world for decades. But did he ever go too far? He generally thought not. But here he discusses a couple of moments that at least gave him pause for thought.
There was a hilarious moment when you were accused of racism. I think. I remember that because it was a joke. But
Well, Dame Edna was writing a column for the Vanity Fair, and it was an agony aunt thing. And people wrote in and said, Dear Edna, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And it was going very well at Vanity Fair. And a woman wrote in and she said, Edna, I'm thinking of learning another language, and I'm thinking of learning Spanish. Is that a good idea? And Edna said, Dear so-and-so, why learn Spanish? Who would you talk to? Your maid? Your leaf blower? You know. She said, if you're an American and want to learn another language, try English. Selma Hayek was on the cover of that Vanity Fair, and so she read it. And she accused me of racism, and she got thousands of people in Mexico to write letters to Vanity Fair, and the editor had to explain what satire was, and that it was actually not intended to be racist. No one got the point. I was sacked.
You were sacked? Is it difficult, though? I mean, you know, treading that fine line between what is very, very funny satire and what really offends people?
I do it rather effortlessly, I like to think. I tread that line, and I don't care. And I just do it instinctively, and it nearly always works. I have very rarely had a walkout.
And here's another moment where Barry feared that Edna had crossed that invisible line between acceptable and too much.
Well, she has spoken out of turn and hurt quite a few people's feelings. There was an event which I rather regret and which nearly ended my career. It was a few years ago in New York, and there was a woman in the front row on the first night wearing sunglasses. She looked a very affected woman. She was trying to draw attention to herself, and Edna kept calling her Four Eyes, you know, and making rude references about people who wear sunglasses indoors, you know. And right at the end of the show, she had another little audience participation thing on the stage, so she called little Four Eyes onto the stage. And the show up till then had gone very well, and the woman rose in her seat, and then, and only then, did I see the white stick. And she came up, and the audience fell silent. And she was wandering kind of crookedly to the stage, and she got up onto the stage. And by then, the silence in the audience was deep, but it was not untinged with contempt, you know. So the woman came quite close, and I was trying to think, what the hell can she say now? I mean, this is it. So I just took a risk. Everything had gone, so I might as well say something. So Edna said, well, darling, thank goodness you didn't bring the dog. And the woman, the woman herself collapsed with laughter.
Barry once said, I was born with a priceless gift, the ability to laugh at the misfortunes of others, and he loved to make an audience gasp, saying that he didn't crave applause, he craved the sound of sharply indrawn breath. Well, on that front, he surely succeeded, and there were many gasps when the news came from Australia that Barry had sadly passed away, aged 89. Without him, television presenters may be able to relax a little bit, but things already feel less exciting, less unpredictable. Looking back, it's clear why Sir Les, and especially Dame Edna, were loved by comedy fans across the world. But although his two genius comic creations may have got most of the attention, it was Barry who was really one of a kind. And with that thought, I'll leave you with just one final moment from the archives, which feels appropriate for a time of reflection. Here's a true Australian icon singing us out with one of the greatest Australian anthems. Goodbye.
Neighbours, everybody needs good neighbours with a little understanding. You can find the perfect blend. Neighbours should be there for one another. That's when good neighbours become good friends. Neighbours, everybody needs good neighbours. Just a friendly wave each morning helps to make a better day. Neighbours, they need to get to know each other.